The storm came out of nowhere, as they often did in the Arizona Territory, transforming the evening sky from gold to bruised purple in minutes. Thomas Garrett had been riding for 2 days straight, pushing his horse hard to reach Silver Creek before nightfall, when the first drops began to fall. Within moments, the rain became a deluge, and lightning split the sky like cracks in broken glass. He was 23 years old and had spent most of those years working his father's ranch in Kansas, learning the trade, but never quite fitting into the rough-and-tumble world of cowboys and saloons. While other young men his age boasted about their conquests and adventures, Thomas kept to himself, reading books by lamplight and dreaming of a life that meant something more than cattle drives and poker games. His father called him soft. His brothers called him strange. Thomas had finally decided to head west, to find land of his own and build something meaningful. Now, soaked to the bone and shivering as the temperature dropped, he spotted a small adobe dwelling tucked against a red rock cliff. Smoke rose from a chimney hole, a thin gray line that promised warmth and shelter. Thomas guided his exhausted horse toward it, knowing he had no choice but to ask for help. Pride wouldn't keep him alive in a storm like this. He dismounted and knocked on the heavy wooden door, rain streaming down his face. The door opened to reveal a woman about his age, with long dark hair braided down her back and eyes that seemed to assess him in a single glance. She was Apache, he realized, and for a moment he froze, every prejudice and warning he'd ever heard echoing in his mind. "Please," he managed, his teeth chattering. "I need shelter." "Just until the storm passes." The woman studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in, bring your horse to the lean-to on the side, quickly." Inside, the dwelling was simple but warm, lit by a fire that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Another woman sat near the hearth, younger than the first, perhaps 19, working on what looked like beadwork. She looked up with curious eyes as Thomas entered, his boots squelching water onto the dirt floor. "I'm Nalin," the first woman said, gesturing to her companion. "This is my sister, Dammy. You can dry yourself by the fire." "Thomas Garrett," he replied, grateful beyond words. "Thank you." "I won't be any trouble." Nalin handed him a rough blanket while Dammy poured something hot from a pot hanging over the fire. Thomas accepted the cup, surprised to find it was some kind of herbal tea, bitter but warming. He sat on a low stool, trying not to stare at the sisters, trying not to think about every story he'd heard about Apache raids and violence. Yet here he was, being shown more kindness than he'd received in any white settlement on his journey west. "You're traveling alone," Nalin observed. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." "Heading to Silver Creek to file a land claim. Long way from anywhere," Dammy said softly, her English accented but clear. "Dangerous for a man alone," Thomas nodded, feeling foolish and young under their knowing gazes. Outside, the storm raged, thunder shaking the very walls of the small dwelling. Nalin moved to secure the door while Dammy began preparing food, and Thomas found himself watching them work with an efficiency born of years of partnership, communicating with glances and small gestures. "You're afraid of us," Nalin said suddenly, settling across from him. Thomas opened his mouth to deny it, then stopped. Something about these women demanded honesty. "I was," he admitted. "I've heard stories, and we've heard stories about white men," Nalin replied, her voice steady. "Yet here you are, and here we are, and we're all just trying to survive a storm." The simple truth of her words struck him like a physical blow. For the first time in his life, Thomas felt the weight of his own ignorance, the easy prejudices he'd carried without examining them. These women had every reason to turn him away, to see him as an enemy, yet they'd shown him mercy. Dammy brought him a bowl of stew, rich with meat and vegetables, and Thomas ate gratefully. As the evening wore on, the sisters began to tell stories. Nalin spoke of their childhood, of a village that no longer existed, of families scattered or dead. Dammy, quieter but no less powerful in her words, described their struggle to maintain their traditions while living on the edges of a world that wanted them erased. Thomas listened, really listened, and felt something fundamental shifting inside him. He told them about his own life, about feeling like a misfit, about running from expectations he could never meet. And in the warmth of that small dwelling with the storm raging outside, he discovered that loneliness and longing were universal languages. "You're not like the others who pass through," Daimi said as the night grew late. "You have a gentle spirit. Don't lose that, even when the world tells you to be hard." "My father says gentleness is weakness," Thomas replied quietly. Nalin shook her head. "Your father is wrong. Gentleness is strength. It takes courage to remain soft in a hard world." Those words settled into Thomas's heart like seeds in fertile soil. As the storm finally began to ease, as the thunder grew distant and the rain softened to a whisper, he realized that this night had changed something essential in him. The sisters had given him more than shelter from the weather. They'd shown him a different way to see the world, to see himself. In the morning, the sky was scrubbed clean and brilliant. Thomas prepared to leave, his horse rested and his own spirit somehow renewed. Nalin and Daimi walked him to the edge of their small property, and he found himself reluctant to go. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate for what he felt. "For everything. Will you keep going to Silver Creek?" Nalin asked. Thomas thought about it, about the land claim, about building a ranch alone on the frontier. "Yes," he said slowly, "but not to build walls. To build bridges." Daimi smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her. "Then you'll do well, Thomas Garrett." He rode away from that Adabobi dwelling a different man than the one who'd arrived. The prejudices that had seemed so solid now felt like paper, easily torn. The loneliness that had driven him west now felt like an opportunity to connect rather than isolate. And the gentleness his father had tried to beat out of him now felt like the greatest gift he possessed. 6 months later, Thomas's small ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where all were welcome. Apache, Mexican, white, it didn't matter. He hired Daimi to help with the horses, discovering she had an extraordinary gift with animals. Nalin came to teach the neighboring children, both white and native, building understanding one lesson at a time. Thomas never did become the hard, ruthless rancher his father had wanted him to be. Instead, he became something better, something the frontier desperately needed. A man who understood that survival wasn't about building walls and hoarding resources, but about extending hands and sharing burdens. A man who knew that one storm-soaked night could change everything if you were brave enough to let it. And on quiet evenings, when he sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire, Thomas would think about that stormy night and smile. He'd gone seeking shelter and found something infinitely more valuable. He'd found his purpose, his family, and himself. The virgin rancher who'd knocked on that door in fear had walked away transformed, carrying with him the greatest lesson 2 Apache sisters could teach: that our shared humanity matters more than our differences, and that true strength comes not from hardness but from an open heart.